Well, hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today from wherever you're watching from. We hope that what we have in store is encouraging and helpful for you. We're very much looking forward to the time and the moments when we can all be back together again. And you know, in the meantime, there's some struggles and some difficulties and lots of things happening in our world along the way, and in your world and in mine as well. And we just pray that in the middle of it, that we just kind of keep looking back to Jesus. That's what I want to continue to do for us, whether it's online or in person as we talk with one another. I just want to keep pointing us back to Jesus as our only hope, and that true life is found by trusting in and following Him. And so I pray as today we jump into the message from Ecclesiastes about the pursuit of pleasure and all the things that we give our lives to in order to find happiness, that we would find our true soul's satisfaction in what Christ has done for us. I just want to remind you too of some of the other opportunities through the week that we have to connect about some of those things. Again, on Wednesday nights is the Good Fight. We're going to have part 2 of that as we jump into it this Wednesday, so watch for that on YouTube as well. Just a reminder that online Voyagers is available, video Voyagers that Mark's been putting up on Facebook through Dropbox. You can check those things out for your kiddos, as well as we continue to reach out with our students to find ways to connect there. And so all those things are available to us. Encourage you to continue to call, check in on one another through these days and moments. And together as we worship in singing, as we open up the Word, I pray that today it's an encouragement for you. Stay well, everybody, and know that we're praying for you, church.
is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When darkness seems to hide His face, I rest on His unchanging grace. Through every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. My anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, we've made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne, faultless to stand before the throne. Oh, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. And through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. Oh, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. And through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all.
You know, growing up, I never would have said that our family had a lot of money. I wouldn't have said we were poor either, but it's kind of like that old Alabama song. You remember we had patches on our britches, but Mama kept us neat, and we had food on the table and shoes on our feet. And I remember this one time when I was in junior high, the in thing to have those days that was kind of like the status symbol of students was a pair of Levi's jeans. And I finally got my hands on a pair. I'd saved up a little bit of extra money, and we got these Levi's jeans because we always did our shopping at places like the Kmart and, you know, some of those other things. We bought generic brands of things, and I never really had Nike shoes until, again, I'd saved up enough money to buy the exact pair that I wanted. And so I remember going to school with these new Levi's jeans one day and trying to impress this one girl in particular. And they said, look, I got this nice new pair of Levi's jeans, and I showed them to her, and she looked at me and she said, oh, those are orange tab not the red tabs. And I thought to myself, this is awful. My heart sank. What I thought was going to impress her actually turned out to be a huge letdown for me. And I, as a kid, knew some people that I thought seemed rich, or at least they seemed a lot richer than I was or my family was, and I certainly didn't know anybody who was famous, that's for sure. But to me, riches were this thing that, I dreamed about having one day, and I defined being rich as this: having $1 million in my bank account and owning a BMW that had windshield wipers on the headlights. And that's a real thing. Go look it up. I worked at a gas station as a kid, and there was one time this car rolled in with wipers on their headlights, and I thought, this person has this car tricked out, and man, he must just be loaded. And I thought, if that was the status symbol for rich, that's what I want. And here's the thing about being rich or famous, is that at some point in all our lives, I'm pretty sure we've dreamed about what it would be like to be rich or famous, or maybe we've even strived after it. What could we do if we had unlimited amounts of cash and zero consequences as to how we spent it? What if we could do whatever we wanted with whoever we wanted, whenever we wanted, and there was no fear of anything ever going wrong? And maybe you've dreamed about having the attention, or being at the center of the spotlight, or never having to worry about paying another bill again. And that kind of view of things is very much a Western idea. It's an idea that of the good life that's actually being sold to us for 3 easy payments of $99.95 or whatever it turns out to be. Shipping and handling and taxes are probably extra on top of that as well. But in our pursuit of that dream of riches or being famous or pleasure, even just generally, I want to pause and ask the question that we're going to get into today, and it's this: what if achieving that is actually evasive? What if we actually get there only to realize that there was still just up ahead? And when we got to the just up ahead, there wasn't actually ever there. In fact, we never could really arrive. Now, one of the things as we've started this journey through Ecclesiastes that we've discovered is that the teacher or the preacher who's speaking to all these views of things, and as he deconstructs all the potential that there is in finding meaning and purpose and significance in particular things in the world, as he does this deep dive into something where he surveys the plane quite widely, as he seeks to understand with wisdom, what is it that will bring us meaning, purpose, and significance? What if his conclusions, actually his major conclusion that he makes about every aspect of his search, is that it's all vanity. It's all mist, a vapor, a fog, a cotton ball cloud. You reach out to grab it and it slips through your fingers. As soon as you think there's some substance to it, it just simply evaporates. And so he deconstructs every pursuit under the sun in an attempt to find whether there's any real meaning, purpose, or significance in life under the sun, or apart from God. And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the desire for remembrance and permanence in our lives. And what he concludes from just simply observing the natural world is that we aren't permanent fixtures on this earth. In fact, when we die, the earth remains. And so there is really no remembrance of us for the most part in years and years and years to come. And then last week we took a look at achieving knowledge and gaining understanding, and the pursuit of that, only to discover that with an increase in knowledge comes an increase in concern. And with knowing more, actually, there's an increase of sorrow in our lives. And today we jump into chapter 2 and his assessment, the teacher's assessment of pleasure. Here's how he opens it up. He said, I said in my heart, chapter 2, verse 1, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. And so he concludes that if there's not going to be permanence, then I'm not going to be remembered. And if wisdom and knowledge don't actually give me meaning, purpose, and significance, maybe I'll chase down pleasure, pleasurable experiences, things that make me happy. I'll chase down all the possible things that might bring me joy and hopefully as a result, fulfillment in the middle of it. And so he does anything that is agreeable to his senses, whatever makes a person happy. It's an experiment that he's going to give an honest evaluation of afterward. And his desire is to discern what is good and what is valuable. Because after all, the mantra that he takes on here is YOLO and FOMO, right? You only live once. And if you don't have the experience, then there's a fear of missing out. And so these are very much the attitudes and opinions of a lot of people in our world today. And Solomon, or the teacher here, actually applies these things as part of his test. There's not going to be one experience I'm going to miss out on. There's not going to be anything I deny myself in a search for pleasure. And I'm going to see if that actually, at the end of the day, brings the meaning and purpose and significance that I so long for. He says, I told myself, just enjoy yourself. Do whatever makes you happy. Follow your heart and don't really concern yourself as to whether or not your heart will lie to you. Just do you. You do you. Do whatever you want to do with whoever you want to do it with, whenever you want and wherever. And so he does this whole thing. And after all, I mean, he doesn't kind of give this conclusion, but you and I have both heard it, and maybe you've even said it before. Because at the end of the day, doesn't God just want us to be happy anyway? And if God just wants us to be happy, then maybe I should define my own happiness. And I'm not advocating that that's a way to actually live your life, but man, we can justify a lot of things in our lives if we just live by the idea that God simply wants me to be happy. And so he is going to enjoy his life, seek out pleasure, and the teacher records again for us a summary of his experiment, his pursuit of pleasure in every way imaginable, hoping to find something that's worth pursuing and has some substance in the end. And so from verses 2 down through to the end of verse 8, I won't read them for us today, but I'll summarize what those things are that he pursues. And the first on the list is wine. Now, that's a turn to for a lot of people. Maybe wine isn't your thing, but some alcoholic beverage, right? Maybe it's craft beer, maybe it's vodka, maybe it's, a martini shaken, not stirred. It could be anything, right? And so he says, I'm gonna chase after drink to cheer my body, is how he describes it. And one of the things that we discover is that usually with alcohol, with wine, it's often paired with good food, right? And those things are very pleasurable. And he says, I'm gonna give myself to drinking good wine and eating good food, and I'm gonna just indulge that experience for myself. So he's not talking about here the drive-through at McDonald's, your Big Mac with your poutine on the side and a extra large Coke to go with it. This isn't kind of just getting you through so you can carry on with your day. No, this is a slow down, fine dining, good meal experience. And so if it was summer, you might picture kind of being out on the porch and it's screened in, so there's no bugs, and there's this beautiful scent flowing by that rolls out of the kitchen, or some kind of candles you've got burning, and it's all set up nice with those fancy light bulbs that everybody gets at Costco, and it's all wooden, and the tables are covered with beautiful linen cloths, and we don't use those cheap disposable throwaway napkins. No, we got those ones that you have to wash and reuse, and you set over your lap just the right way. And then as we're all there, you got your greatest friends around you, and you're all sitting at the table laughing and enjoying things and telling stories, and and then you order off the menu, and you get that hors d'oeuvre that you've just been so waiting to sink your teeth into, and it comes, and then you have your main course, right? And the chef has already paired a wine with it that's supposed to go so well with whatever food you're eating, and then you come to the end of that, and it's been so good, this meal, and you get that dessert again that you've been just waiting to eat, and it's going to be so good, and you come to the end of the meal, right? And it's only good too if there's a large bill attached to it, I'm sure. But listen, that's the kind of thing that we picture. And for him, it wasn't like a one-off encounter, a one-off experience. It wasn't just a special moment. No. I cheered my body regularly with these kinds of things. It was a common experience for him. And so for us, whether it's going to that special restaurant, or you got your big green egg, or your charcoal grill, or you've got your barbecue, and you've got the meats from that one place in particular, and you've got everything all done up how you wanted to do it, to enjoy good food and wine, hoping that will cheer your body. Now, the funny thing about our culture too is if that's not enough, here's the other thing that we love to do. We love to take pictures of those moments too, don't we? Right? Like you've got your phone held down at the edge of the table just to get the right angle of everybody laughing, or to get kind of the picture of the food and just the right light that you're going to add a filter to anyway later on, so you can post it on Instagram or Facebook, and you can snap it, and you can say, hey, guess where I am, and look how great my supper was, and maybe it's even the thing that you cooked yourself. I mean, if you stop and think about it, food's meant to be enjoyed by eating, not just by looking at. I'm reminded of that commercial. I don't even remember what it was for, but there's this commercial, two people sitting down at a restaurant about to eat, and the one person gets up with one foot on the chair and one foot on the table, and they got their camera, and they're going like this, trying to get the best angle of the picture, and the other person's already done their meal, and this person hasn't even started yet because they're still taking pictures of their food. I mean, it's kind of absurd when you think about it, but that's part of the culture that we live in. Man, I've even done it before too, so I'm not knocking anybody for that, but that's the first thing that he tried to do, is cheer his body with what he would put into it. And then he says, I pursued other things as well. I undertook to do great projects, he said. I built houses, not just renovated, but I built houses. And I built vineyards too, because I didn't want to just have to purchase the good wine and the best wine. Maybe I could even make my own wine. And so he built vineyards and gardens and parks even. Now you got to stop and think about that, because a garden is one thing of a particular size, and your garden might just be a single little bed. It might be quite expansive, but a park, I mean, that's a whole lot bigger. And he says, I built gardens and I built parks. I've increased the size. He said, I built these pools to hold water so that I could water the forests that I planted. I mean, this is expansive. These kind of projects are massive. And he's not just going to rely on rain from the skies. He's going to build his own aqueduct system, an irrigation system, to make sure that forest grows and grows well. I mean, this is huge industry that he undertakes of land development and everything else. And I mean, for us, we may not do that expansive of projects, but listen, let's be honest, we've all wanted to renovate that one room in our house, haven't we? We all wanted to put that kind of feature wall in, or the coffee bar in the kitchen, or the breakfast nook, or maybe that reading nook downstairs or upstairs by the window. Or maybe it's not just your house you've been wanting to renovate and put the new floors in, or give it a fresh paint job, or tear out all the cupboards, or repaint the cupboards. It could be, no, we got the cottage we're building by the lake. That's our dream now. And it's going to be perfect. It's going to have the best views facing the sunset sunset. It's not going to be too far from the water. It's going to be good fish in there. The kids can swim. The grandkids can come hang out. We got the fire pit over in the perfect spot. You know, where maybe it's your porch in your backyard that you've extended and you've got the fire pit on it, and you know, you've got it set up so you can put your TV outside and watch the baseball game in the middle of the summer. You know, maybe it is the fire pit or the pool with the deck or the flower beds or the garden or the whatever the project is. And in some small way, we mimic our desire for pleasure after the teacher's expansive search, his expansive projects. And if that weren't enough, he said, now I realized I had all these projects. I needed people to manage them. And so he says, so I bought slaves and I hired servants to look after everything I owned. Now, I know for some of us that is offensive language and it's unthinkable, and should we even be discussing that kind of thing? The reality is that in that day and age, that's the thing that he did. And in his search for pleasure and his pursuit to manage it all and to make it all just exactly as he wanted, he had to get the right people around him in order to do it. And so he had advisors who would even help him manage his wealth well. He hired cooks and cleaners so he wouldn't have to make a meal or do any of his laundry. There were gardeners who would tend to all the plants and the produce and making sure all the best conditions were being met to have the best harvest possible. He hired laborers and masonry, people to do masonry, and he had the carpenters who were there, and people to build roads and paths through the forest and all those kinds of things. He probably even had a pilot on call and a driver who could take him wherever he wanted. And what is it that this speaks of? It speaks toward a life of ease, of freedom from the direct responsibility of the day-to-day life. In fact, in some ways, we might even argue that the pursuit here of pleasure is the pursuit of freedom from work, to do as little as possible so that he could get on to enjoying life. And in some ways, isn't that too the pursuit of so many? Because we're all just working for the weekend. If I didn't have to be stuck in this job, if I could just live my life and do the things I wanted and go where I wanted and do the things that made me happy and not be chained to my desk or whatever it might be, if I could be free from all these responsibilities, if I could just hand them off to somebody else so that I could simply enjoy life. It's the pursuit of pleasure and of happiness through wine and cheering his body, through projects and making things just so, through having the right people to take care of all the responsibilities so he wouldn't have to. And as if that were not enough, he says, I even pursued gaining possessions. He says, I sought to get herds and flocks and land for them as well. And so he starts farming, right? He's got cows and sheep and all of that kind of thing. And then, for some of us, it's like, no, I don't even want to go there. I don't want to have to look after any of that for sure. Like, this is not my thing. For some of us, it's like, oh, can you imagine having a huge farm? Wouldn't that be so awesome? But in that day, having flocks and herds was a sign of wealth and riches. And not only did he seek to increase his farm and farmland and farming operation, he also sought out silver and gold and treasure, a fat bank account, nice precious jewels that he could wear from time to time, or the expense account was so large he didn't have to worry about keeping track of it. I mean, for him, there were no concerns ever about having insufficient funds or a check bouncing back or worrying and stressing about what the Visa bill was going to be when it came in next month. He didn't concern himself as to when bills were due or how much they would be, because he had just amassed so much wealth. and treasure. He had no concerns about those kinds of things. And while that may not be the case for some of us watching today, it may not be the case that, that we're not concerned about finances and how we're going to pay the next bill, or whether our kids get Levi's jeans or the generic brand from Walmart. Those might be the kinds of questions that we have. And this is just so far up and above and beyond anywhere we might think we would ever get to. And yet, even in the midst of it, our culture is built on things like retail therapy. I mean, it's strange, isn't it, that even those two words would go together, retail therapy, that we find it therapeutic to spend money in order to increase debt so that we can feel better about ourselves, and yet later on stress and worry about it. It's bad therapy if it is therapy at all, but that's what we have. I mean, we live in a day and age where there's so many packages coming to the door that when you get an Amazon box, it's like Christmas, because you don't even know what's in it. You've ordered so many things. And so whenever you open it up, it's like, oh, that's what I ordered, right? Like that happens for so many of us. And yet, right, it's the window shopping on Kijiji or Marketplace, or I saw this and maybe we should get it. I just happened to be looking and, oh man, there was something I was sold on and we should buy it, right? And maybe, for some of us, and for some people, the level up is we have so much that, man, what's the next thing? We could buy anything we want. Well, we look to buy the experience of something, and so we build a rocket and shoot ourselves into space just to say that we could. The thing is that with all of that, we end up with an complex, because we want the bigger thing, the better thing. We want to be stronger. We want to be wealthier, right? And because we think that in all of that, we will be happier. And so he sought to accumulate, the teacher, great possessions in his search for pleasure. And then he kind of ties it all up and says, not only were all those things I pursued, but I also pursued the entertainment value that comes with life. And I deny myself nothing in that entertainment. I hired singers and musicians. I surrounded myself with women to look at and to touch. And I didn't deny myself any pleasure in the process. And so what he's saying is that, look, I spent my weekends chasing after concerts and vacations. I spent my time looking for the next hookup. I went on the weekend bender. I asked for the hall pass and took it. I went to, the city, and whatever happens there stays there. Like I denied myself nothing in life in terms of entertainment, of good music, and of women. And the thing is that we also live in a culture that's bent on entertainment, don't we? I mean, you think about even just something as simple as Netflix or Disney Plus, right? The goal there is just to consume content, to watch movies, to binge watch on TV shows. In fact, the CEO of Netflix was once asked, who's your biggest competition? And you know what his response was? It wasn't another company. He said, our biggest competition is sleep, and we are winning. You know why? Because people will binge watch show after show after show after show and stay up late into the night just watching, consuming content to be entertained by something. And not only that, but on YouTube, how many hours are spent watching clips and videos on YouTube or videos on Facebook that you get kind of stuck in the feed of, right? In fact, I looked up just recently the top grossing earners from YouTube in 2020. So just last year, in 2020 or 2021, one of the two, in the top 10 most paid people who had YouTube's account, 2 of the 10 gained a significant amount of their money by creating videos of them playing video games. And so people will come to their YouTube channel and watch them play video games, right? Not actually playing the games themselves, but people watching, but they would watch somebody else through a screen play a video game. And of the top 10 earning YouTubers, 2 of the 10 of them made millions of dollars off of other people simply watching them play video games. On social media, we have a whole generation of people when they grow up who want to be social media influencers. That's the job they want to have, right? To gain followers, to take all kinds of pictures and to promote products. And that's what I'm going to do with my life, is be an influencer on social media. Now, all of these kinds of things tie into entertainment value, don't they? And the unfortunate part is, and can I just pick a little bit, that happens within the church too. It's a consumer mindset. It becomes an entertainment value that we show up and we watch instead of participate. That we attend, and then when we leave, we talk about whether or not that the sermon was good or better than last week, or we critique how somebody was dressed or what kind of music there was, or is the church doing the latest study by the latest person, and all those kinds of things become measures of our religious experience. And it's just simply entertainment. It's a seeking of pleasure under the label of religiosity. Am I pushing a little too far? Let's move on. And so he says at the end of all this, he says in verse 9, "So I became great, and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem, and all my wisdom remained with me." He says, listen, I had reached the top. By every definition, I was there. I had the life that everybody wanted. I, in fact, accomplished a lot of the things that I even wanted to accomplish. And he says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in my toil, and this was my reward for all of my toil. He says, I had an appetite for whatever I saw, and I never, ever said no. Whatever my eyes desired, I chased after. And in every example he's given of searching out pleasure in his life, he always makes self-referential statements. I, me, myself. And what he says is that I found pleasure in all those things. That's his conclusion. It was pleasurable. And so there's this thing that I think for some of us, we think that, chasing after pleasure just isn't pleasurable in the end, when his conclusion is actually it is pleasurable. There are pieces of that I actually found pleasurable and I enjoyed. I did things that made me happy. They really, really did. But then his conclusion, and here's the insight that he gives, it is, and this was my reward for my toil. That in the end, it was pleasure itself that was the only reward. There was nothing permanent about it. In fact, it was only momentary. It was only immediate. It was only what could happen within this window of time. And that's very much a culture of consumption. It's very much a consumer culture that we actually live in, where everything is for sale and everything is meant to be consumed. And so we spend money on goods and services in order to attain a particular kind of lifestyle. We drink lots of wine, and we pursue relationships, and we try to acquire possessions or renovate the perfect space. And the pursuit of all of that is so that we can have a particular kind of life that we've always wanted. And then he says in verse 11, "Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, and a striving after wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. His conclusion is, after I did all of this, I sat down and I looked back over it all to evaluate it. Was there meaning? Was there purpose? Was there significance in any of it? And his conclusion was the same. It's all vanity. It's a fog, it's a mist, it's a vapor. You grab onto it like a cotton ball cloud only to realize there's no substance there. He says it's like a striving after or a feeding on when always chasing and never catching. And in the end, there was nothing to be gained under the sun. In the end, there was nothing left. There was nothing lasting, only the memory of the experience that happened for a moment. And then it was gone. If I could kind of sum up the teacher's thoughts here, it would be something like this, that fully funded self-indulgence is really simply a dead-end street. 7 different times through the book of Ecclesiastes, the teacher says something like, pleasure is a gift from God to be enjoyed. In fact, a little bit later on in chapter 2, verse 24, he says, there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? In other words, all of those pleasurable moments we experience, right? The source ultimately comes from the hand of God. And so it's good that we enjoy those gifts as gifts from God, but later on at the end of the book, he gives us this caution about it in chapter 11, verse 9. He says, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes, but know that for all of these things, God will bring you into judgment. In other words, enjoy the gifts that are given from God, but be sure to enjoy them responsibly. Because at the end of the day, God will call us to account for the pleasures we sought and how we sought them. And so what would the teacher have us do? What would be his conclusion? What do we do with any of this if it's all fleeting and doesn't have meaning that's lasting, or there's not anything to be gained under the sun? What's the conclusion? Well, the conclusion is simply this: eat a good meal, accomplish great projects, invest wisely, listen to good music. All those things are good gifts from God. Light the candles and enjoy the romance. They're all gifts from God, but at the end of the day, just know that none of these things will satisfy our deepest longing. And at the end of the day, they really gain us nothing under the sun. Jesus tells a similar story in Luke chapter 15. And there's this one point, he says that there's a man who had 2 sons, and the younger son says to his dad, Dad, I know someday I'm going to get my share of your inheritance, but I want it now. I have this immediate need. I'm tired of working here for you and of living this life and waiting for you to be dead. Just give me what's mine and what's coming to me, and I'll get out of here. And the father liquidates his assets and obliges. He gives him his share of the inheritance, and the youngest son goes off and squanders it all. Now, for a time, he was living the high life. He was enjoying every aspect of it. There was nothing he denied himself. He sought pleasure in every single opportunity that it was available, until one day, he swiped the credit card and it was maxed out. And one day he swiped his debit card and there were insufficient funds. And he realizes he'd spent it all. And to top it all off, what was worse is that, as Jesus tells the story, there was a famine in the land, and the famine was so severe that he couldn't find anything to eat. In fact, nobody would feed him, and he hired himself out to work for a pig farmer, which you got to understand in this culture, in this context, like that is the lowest of the lowest things that a Jewish person would do. He's looking after pigs, and he was so hungry that he even desired to eat what the pigs were eating, but nobody would feed him. Until one day he wakes up and realizes, I had it better with my father. And I know what I need to do. I need to go back. And I know that I don't deserve to be called his son anymore, but at least I'll beg him to see if I can work for him as one of his hired hands. And so he makes the journey home, and he rehearses the script over and over in his head. And when he's completely spent and at the end of his rope and the bottom's fallen out of the barrel, he's getting close to home, and somehow the father sees him approaching. And this dad gets up and runs after his son. And he gives him a big hug, and the son starts to say his rehearsed piece, and the father cuts him off and says, "Welcome home. Welcome home, my son. Quick, get a robe and put it on him. Give him the ring. Let's kill the fattened calf. We are going to throw a block party because this son of mine who was dead is now alive. He was lost and now he's found, and we need to celebrate that he has returned home." For some of us, that's the life we've been living. We've been taking every opportunity to chase down what we think will make us happy, only to realize in the end that the bottom will eventually fall out of the barrel. Now, when he gets home and the party's happening, something else happens. There's the older brother who stayed with the father, who knows he's getting the inheritance in the end, but he's been faithful. He's stuck around. He's been loyal, right? He's always showed up. He's always obeyed. And when he comes back in from working, the party's going on, and he asks what's happening. And somebody says, your brother's come home and we're celebrating and having a party. And this older brother comes to his father and says, "What's up with that? Like he basically told you, Dad, you're as good as dead, and now you're celebrating him." And it's not just that for the older son. The older son actually talks about how I have always been faithful. I have all these years, I've never disobeyed you. I've always done what you asked, and you've never given me anything that I could even have a little bit of a celebration with some of my friends. This just isn't fair. And he's fed up, and he's angry, and he's mad at his father. And his father says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother who was dead is now alive, and he was lost, and now he's found." And the implication of the story is, won't you join a party? And we never know what the response of the older brother was. And the thing is that both of those sons, for both of them at some point in the story, it was about their desires and about their wants and about what would make them happy. Because it was really for them about them. And the only true satisfaction that you and I will ever find for our souls will only come through returning to the Father. Whether that requires repentance from just, the awful kind of living that we've done, the kinds of things that we've never denied ourselves of that were sinful, or whether it is our own self-righteousness and self-justification, thinking we've got it all together and everybody else is worse. The reality is that only until we repent of those sins and embrace our Father in heaven will we know our soul's true satisfaction. Because it's, at the end of the day, not really about the pleasure we seek and the meaning that we hope to gain from those happy moments, but it is about the embrace that we have with our Heavenly Father.